This is great.
It
Here we
is.
are, Nadine. We made it happen.
We made it happen, brother. What's going on?
I'm so excited about this because you are, to me, you are like a celebrity in the world that I'm paying attention to right now. I'm serious. I'm serious. You are
Dude,
like
I love you, but I think you need a better world.
that. That's probably true too. But for the people that are tuning in and listening, what I need to, explain to everyone is that I've been paying attention to Nadine for a while now, mostly because we do a lot of the same stuff. But not only do we do a lot of the same stuff, she's been paying very close attention to technology as it relates to what we do. And I'm just kind of getting into that part of things. But she's really been living in that world for quite some time. And as I'm paying attention, what I'm really realizing is that there's a humongous disconnect between, the chatter you're hearing out there, a lot of vendor driven, information, hopes and dreams about what the technology, specifically now AI, what it can do. And then boots on the ground, what is the normal practitioner really experiencing? How are they able to use it? And that disconnect is humongous. So when I saw the other day, Nadine, when you posted on LinkedIn, it was a very cool post. You said something along the lines of the AI that you're using, it is reducing the initial lease review by something like 70-80%. And that was like pretty mind blowing to me because, well, two things. First of all, props to you. That is absolutely incredible. But second of all, that is very far from what I'm experiencing, what most of the people that I'm talking to are experiencing. So I thought, what better way to carve out an episode on signals, not noise, to dedicate to you and what you do, and how is it that you're really able to get all those kind of successes so far? So before we dive in on kind of the more meaty stuff, Nadine, why don't you tell everyone kind of who you are, um, where you come from, how you've come to this point, and how you've been able to really kind of gain the successes so far that you have in the space that we live in.
Uh, Thanks so much for that really lovely introduction. And thanks for having me. I told you before we hit record, I love what you're doing. You're probably one of the coolest guys I know in terms of commercial real estate and lawyers. Okay. So this is great. You are not afraid to step outside of your comfort zone and have these conversations. So thanks for facilitating this and having
Appreciate
me.
that.
No, yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for 20 years. I think I just aged myself. I think we're all getting there right now.
We're there.
So my background is that I am a commercial real estate attorney. In my journey in seeking out better ways of doing what we do started over 10 years ago. I was general counsel for an owner and operator developer, and we were in acquisition mode. And like a lot of these in-house legal departments, I was very lean. And so I was doing a lot of this work myself and I loved it. But I also
Mhm.
just became very sensitive to how inefficient the way we as an industry just tend to operate, not just from a transactional standpoint, but just all the workflows themselves, right? I just recognize all the different silos and all the inconsistencies and it was just I was very sensitive to it, right? And so
Yeah.
I did what I could in that role to try to do things as efficiently as possible, implement workflows and procedures and templates. But I hit this plateau, right? Where I realized there was only so much I could do in that role, right? I was general counsel. I wasn't their head of innovation. I wasn't there to bring on new technology. And so I made the decision at that point that I wanted to go be part of finding a solution. And I had no idea what that meant. But I knew that I had to step away from law for a little bit. And so I was lucky enough to be hired by an early stage prop tech company in Boston, started by a couple of really great and talented commercial real estate attorneys that had set out to automate the drafting and negotiation of commercial lease agreements. So
Mm.
I joined that company as their head of customer success and onboarding and worked with them for 4 years. And I gotta tell you, what an eye-opening experience. Our end users were people like you in law firms, in-house lawyers at, some of the biggest and best owners and operators across the country. And I spent 4 years with one foot working with our product team, helping them build the product, but the other foot working directly with the end users and listening to them and working with them and getting them to change the way they do their work to be able to use our software. And it was there that I realized that there's this huge chasm, and you and I talk about this a lot,
Yeah.
between the readiness and the preparedness and the mindset of folks like us to be able to change the way we do things and all of the innovation and tech solutions out there that are trying to sell to them.
Hmm.
But there needs to be a bridge, somebody that can kind of be this translator that can kind of, empathize with the lawyers and understand where they're coming from, but also have this really intimate understanding of the technology and what it can do and how to connect the two. That really became a personal mission of mine, to be honest with you. And so I left that company 4 years ago and started my own company, Ezzie and Co. And, I was practicing law again, commercial real estate, but also doing a lot of consulting and advisory work in this space. And then last year, teamed up with two of the best in the industry, Jonathan Bucklew and Topher Stevenson, and we founded the CRE AI Studio. And we have set out to educate as many people as we can in our industry, lawyers and non-lawyers alike, on
Hmm.
how to leverage AI effectively to, really cut down on the inefficiencies in our industry. And so I'm applying, um, you know, everything that I've learned over the last 10 years, to do this. And you mentioned, me cutting down lease review by 80%. So because I do still run a law firm, it's kind of like my testing ground. And so
Right.
I am able to bring forth all of the trial and error and best practices from Lease Pilot, which was the startup I was in, and apply that to what I'm doing right now. And that's how I can get to where I'm going because I've done it many, many times, many, many times. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. The use cases and the success cases, they're there. You need to be able to know how to get there.
So before we get into, how you're able to do some of that, given all the background, I'm interested to understand a little bit more. What is that big chasm that you learned about over the years being at Lease Pilot and working with the owner operators and the lawyers and the people that really were going to use the technology? What was the biggest missing ingredient that required that bridge that you're talking about?
This is such a good question. This is such a good question. It's multifaceted. So I'm going to just kind of throw out a couple of things that contribute to it, right? That
Yep.
that allow it to
Okay.
continue to exist, right? So a couple of things that I saw: improper expectation setting. Okay. So you've got, let's just say, the vendors that they want you to buy the product. And I'm not trying to paint this picture of nefarious vendors by any means, but it's really just a tension between the goals of each of these different stakeholders. Okay. So you've got the vendors. A lot of times, not in our case, but a lot of times these vendors have built this product and they don't really understand the end user, you know? In our
Mm.
case, the product was built by lawyers. And so it had a very intimate understanding of the end user they were trying to sell to. That's not always the case. And so when you have a vendor that doesn't have a very intimate understanding of the friction and problems that they are trying to solve, that in and of itself is going to lead to a disconnect sometimes on the expectation setting of what their product can do, right? So
So
that's
let's pause there for a second because without naming names, there are some big players right now in the AI legal space. They've got a lot of lawyers on board. They've got a lot of people that say, "I've been practicing, and here's how our system works, and we're a part of this amazing technology." Is there still a bridge to cross there, even when you've got lawyers that are representing the companies and rolling out these products?
I think so. And that leads me to the topic of change management. It takes time to successfully foster and support people changing the way they have been doing things for decades, right? It's not something that is going to happen overnight, especially with folks like us, like attorneys. Right? Think of the way that we were trained. Trial and error wasn't something that was incentivized. If you think about it, right? If anything, is the opposite. And so we were trained to get to the right answer with as little error as possible. And with us in the fast paced nature of our industry, as quickly as possible. We don't
Hmm.
have time to try new ways, right? And you and I have talked about this a lot. It
Hmm.
leads to frustration because we have all the external pressures from our clients, right? What's the status of this document? I got to get this done. Did we get this deal signed, right? We
Right.
operate in volume and in speed, right?
Hmm.
That's the industry that we work in. And so, yeah, that chasm is still there because to get people like us to effectively slow down, carve out some time in which we can actually experiment takes time. I learned this. I saw it firsthand at Lease Pilot, right? We had to hold hands. We would have to do weekly calls with our customers, screen sharing. Show me
Hmm.
what you're doing, right? Okay, you
Right.
know what? That was good that you tried that, but this is where you need to do. I'm talking a very granular level
Right.
of support repetitively until it finally starts to stick. And so that business model, right? That's not going to work for a tech vendor. That's not how the economics of that are set up. And so, yeah, I'm talking to a lot of folks out there that are doing these pilots on these big names that you and I talk about, right? And they're like, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the results. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm calling the vendor. I'm trying to get as
Hmm.
much support as I can. And that is because the level of support and time it takes to effectively change the way that we do things is going to take a heck of a lot more hands-on support than is being offered right now.
Super interesting. So maybe let's kind of accelerate past that pain point and let's kind of focus in a little bit about what you're doing, how you're able to approach that kind of same exercise that frankly you and I both do on a day-to-day basis. I've played around with it. I've experimented, not nearly as much as you, I'm sure, and also without the same kind of background. But I'm really interested to know from your perspective, what is really required to get the systems that everyone talks about are, plenty powerful and plenty impressive. What is really required on a more kind of granular level to get to the point where you're saying it's getting me that 80% of the way there? What are people kind of missing out? And I'm sure by talking about it, you're not gonna, you know, all of a sudden turn everyone into achieving that 70% because it's a huge lift. It's kind of like saying, oh, I'm going to tell you what you need to do to become a CrossFit athlete. You could talk about it till you're blue in the face, but
Right.
then like people have to go to the gym every day for the next 10 years
Right.
and become that athlete. So I know you're not like giving away any huge secrets, but you know, maybe just talk a little bit about that because I think that's really what I'm super focused on and trying to understand. And I'm sure a lot of people are really curious about what does the other side look like and how do you get.
I love this conversation, this question. You and I talk about this often, and I'll tell as much as I know. Because to the very point that you just said, it's not something that somebody can just kind of take and run with it. And and if they were able to, that's great. I'd be very happy with that. So it takes
Mhm.
a couple of things. How am I able to get there? How have I got there? Again, it's a lot of factors at play. Number one, I'm intentional about carving out the time to experiment. And I can do that because my work is not 100% practicing attorney, and that's by design, right? I
Mhm.
do it just enough so that I'm still an active practicing attorney, but I'm also an educator in this space, right? And
Mhm.
I've got the AI studio in which I'm working with the guys, and I'm demoing these products, and it's by design that I keep enough space where I'm not inundated with the volume of work and the pressures of having to get things out the door. So that's number one. Number two, I
And
know.
also, by the way, you got to be someone that understands this stuff because this is your thing.
Yeah, right. Number two, here's how I started out, right? I started out real small use cases, right?
Okay.
Draft this clause for me.
Mhm.
I didn't even try to upload anything into an application first. ROFO, right? Draft a ROFO. Here,
Yeah.
I would give it enough information on the deal. Here's what I need. Draft me a ROFO clause.
Yeah.
And I
By
would
the
just,
way, I'm with you there so far.
okay,
I'm I'm
great.
I'm good with that. We're
Yeah. And so, and then again, number one, and I went into it with the mindset that yes, this is a tool, but it needs to be trained. And that's something that's challenging, right? Because right?
That is a piece I definitely want to spend some time on here because I think that's a lot different than out of the box. Here's our tool. You can get going right away. If it's really about this kind of training element, that's something that's really not emphasized nearly enough. So I'm
No,
really
yeah,
excited to
and
hear
listen,
about
I
that.
struggled with it a little bit. I mean, I'm gonna be very honest, this is not something I got right out of the box. And
Hmm.
if you think about it, think about our experience with tech tools to date, right? There was no interaction with it where we had to train it. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're working with a startup, you'll give feedback to the vendor, to the startup team, whoever who's gonna go back and implement it into the technology, and they're gonna then deliver an update to you. But we weren't interacting directly with the tech. The tech
Hmm.
was a tool, it was designed to do its job. It did its job. We used it, right? We
Hmm.
used the technology. Whereas now we need to shift our mindset to think about it as something we work with, not something that's performing a task, not just performing a task for us,
Hmm.
right? So it's
Hmm.
multifaceted in that way. And I got to be honest with you, that took me a minute to catch up with as well. But once I caught up and started interacting with it, and we talk about this a lot, right? And the analogy is thrown out there a lot. Think of it as a junior associate, think of it as a
Hmm.
junior analyst, whatever that role is. I would need to pause and say, okay, envision I was training a junior associate who brought this clause back to me. How would I give them feedback? And that's how I started giving feedback to the applications and back and forth until I got the product that the output, I should say, that was correct. So that's just how I started.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So what you're saying is you're prompting, you're giving information, and then it's giving you something that's not quite what you were hoping necessarily, maybe
Correct.
like a junior associate, and then providing another layer and another layer and another layer of feedback so that you're correcting it and you're saying that it's kind of getting closer and closer to what you would expect from someone that is an associate that's paying attention, that's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it's getting better and better as it goes along. Is that kind of
Yeah,
the
exactly.
idea?
That's what we mean by training the models, right? And it's not just telling it what it got wrong, it's also means telling it what it got right so that it can program that and know, okay, this is what is expected of me going forward in this scenario. This is what I got right. This is what I got wrong. Let me keep learning. We hear a lot about the terminology train the models. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. Telling it what it's doing right, but also telling it what it needs to correct and just going back and forth.
So there's a scenario you're saying where, because like for example, I'll do a lease for 5,000 feet. I'll do a lease for 15,000 feet, 20, 50, 75, 100, 200, 300, 500,000 square feet. The variation between the 5,000 footer and the 500,000 footer is enormous. On the
Mhm.
bigger deals, there is a uh, huge amount of detail, huge amount of points raised, and level of um, detail to concepts that you wouldn't see in a 5,000, 10,000 footer. But I guess what I'm asking is what you're saying is that if you actually were to take the time to kind of layer in as you're going along and doing a bigger and bigger deals and training it on the nuances of those more involved bigger deals, that there's a point in which you can get a deal in for 10,000 feet and kind of direct it that you want it to produce something that's appropriate for those type of deals as opposed to the 500,000 as opposed to the 5,000 footer.
Yes, yes, and what I found is that the more sophisticated LLMs, they already contained that ability to make that distinction on a general basis. I was blown away by this. What they needed was more deal specific and market specific guidance, right? And often though, it was already there a little bit. So we have to remind ourselves that these models are trained on billions and billions of data points, more than our human minds have as
Mhm.
well, right? More than our firm's databases probably have. And so that general framework of being able to distinguish between those different deals that you just described and what would be necessary in order to negotiate them, that general framework was already there in an impressive level. And so I would just simply go and add on to that, right? Massage it, add the nuance, add the market's data, so to speak, and whatnot to be able to get it to where I need it to be. I need to add though, and I know you're probably going to get there. And I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
Please go.
People might be thinking, what about confidentiality and data privacy? Were you putting everything in there? The answer is no, I'm not, right? And so for those of us that are familiar with, let's just use a commercial lease as an example, typically the deal terms are found in the beginning of the lease, Article 1, right? The deal term lease summary. I'm not going to upload those into a non-enterprise LLM. And so I'll
Hmm.
just create a new version of that document in which I've taken out, let's just use Article 1 as an example, or any exhibits or riders that have any identifying information. I'm
Right.
still left with a pretty robust document that needs review. Right?
Oh
But
yeah,
that
for
doesn't
sure.
have deal specific information in it. So, I
Right.
mean, I'm still getting time savings by having it review that and give me recommended red lines and negotiation points or whatever. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so for people that are paying attention to this, that are using some of the, LLMs that are or the legal, AI companies that are marketing, towards the law firms, the big ones, they've already kinda solved for that because they've got super heightened security, and
Right.
so in those cases, you're just kind of working with the documents. You don't have to redact, but I hear what
Right.
you're saying for those that are, kinda using more generic LLMs. Before you do that, you gotta take out the
Yeah, there's a lot
sensitive
of folks out
information.
there that are smaller shops and they're like, listen, I don't want to pay $2,500 for a seat for this application.
Right.
How can I make these other off the shelf applications work for me, right? Without sacrificing or compromising the privacy and confidentiality of the actual deal specific terms. And you can absolutely do that. Absolutely.
Right. So you're seeing that in the world of this technology really being leveraged by, the world of lawyers, there is this process and investment that's required by the individual lawyer, by the individual group. Every practice is different. Every practice has its own nuances. Every group likes to practice differently. So it's almost like thinking about bringing in associates as opposed to bringing in a program from the outside. We're just going to, you open the box and it's going to do its thing.
That's a really good way of putting it. You actually just triggered in my mind something that I did want to raise that is important. Yes, we all practice differently, right? The different groups and whatnot. And there's been a lot of effort to try to standardize that, right? From the technology side of the world. And I get that. It's very difficult to automate a process that is not standardized, right? It makes
Hmm.
sense. So I do believe that if we want to leverage the power of these tools, there will need to be some element of standardization on our part as well. So if you're a group where everybody's still doing things their own way and people are going rogue and they have information stored on their desktops or whatever, and there is no playbook and all of the preferred provisions are just embedded within various different lease documents or purchase and sale agreements. If you really, really want to leverage the power that is at your fingertips right now with these tools, you got to hit pause and do a little bit of work to clean that stuff up. Otherwise, you're just going to be perpetuating more of the same. So what's the point, right, of trying to leverage these tools if you're not going to pause and try to clean things up a little bit? So the teams that I've worked with that have had the most success are the ones that do that work. And it's very not sexy, right? And it's
Hmm.
painful. You and I talk
Yeah.
about it because, again,
Yeah.
it requires somebody to hit pause from the fast paced world of our negotiations and getting deals done
Hmm.
and out the door to be able to do this work. But it's actually really, really, really critical, really
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm on our AI subcommittee and piloting legal AI tools, and one of the things that comes up is once you get into it is, well, this works great if everything is nice and organized and you
Right.
can just grab all these first drafts that you can have it learn from. But most law firms, they have not historically been, keeping track of their data and their files in that kind of a way. So there is this lift that's required that is really kind of the elephant in the room in a lot of
Mhm.
these kind of, discussions with the AI vendors, the AI legal vendors. So I very much understand that point. That makes, a ton of sense to me. I guess the question there is, you know, how much do you really need to uncover from the kind of precedent, world? Like, I mean, obviously the more the better, but, can you do it with 10 examples, you know, 30 examples? Where do you think the mere mortal lawyer, can get value by doing that kind of work and pulling that data set?
I'm smiling because I love this question. And this goes back to this overarching principle of how best to leverage and use AI. The point is to not remove us as the human entirely from the process, right? It's to try to figure out how much of that process, and let's just use the lease negotiation workflow
Hmm.
as our example for today, okay? How much of that is best suited to have AI review it and provide feedback? And where should we hit pause and stop on that, where the human then comes in and takes over the negotiation, so to speak? We know, and this is what I love about commercial real estate, and I bet you're the same, right? I love when we have to get creative, right? I love when we got to get creative as it relates to a space. And you and I were just talking about this the other day. And so the goal is not to automate everything 100% of the way. The goal is not to remove ourselves completely, right? Again, try to think about what would be the purpose of leaning on a junior associate. It's not to remove
Hmm.
you as the senior partner entirely out of the process, but to get them
Right.
to get you, 75, 80% of the way there so that you can then step in and be strategic in your negotiation. So back to your question, we all know that there's certain provisions that are predictable. Right. And I saw this time and time again when I was at Lease Pilot that don't necessarily need that much of the strategic negotiation mindset, so to speak.
Hmm.
So, and so we always advise folks, your deals the best, your documents the best. And usually when I sit down with my clients, my consulting clients, and we do this type of work, it's always unearthed, right? People have the answers in their head. They know typically what their preferred fallback provisions are. It's usually just a matter of finding them, pulling them, and putting them in a central place. So to answer your question, whether it takes 10 examples or 30 examples, the answer really is with you guys. And so, and I think it's very important for me to get that point across, and that we as the end users are the subject matter experts. We have a lot of the answers. It's just a
Hmm.
matter of sitting down and kind of switching our brains to a different mindset and having a different conversation to be in this back and forth questioning and have somebody say, okay, what now, walk me through this clause, walk me through that clause. You absolutely know. And so it really just depends on your own knowledge of your forms and your templates and your language. And there is really no tried and true rule, but we know. And so it's really just like, how do we get ourselves 70% of the way there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. So to kind of wrap things up, um, how would someone that has little to a little bit or anything really shy of Nadine's skill set, how would someone get going and be on a path to getting to the point where they're really able to leverage this technology in a meaningful way?
I'd say start with education. Find, and I know that sounds might be a bit of a self-serving statement, but whether it's courses that my colleagues and I offer or somebody else, you got to start with education. You got to carve out the time to be able to learn these things. We all of
Hmm.
us, we're not just lawyers. Every role out there right now is going to have to engage in some type of relearning, re-education, right? Because AI is going to be able to do a lot of the things that we are doing today. And so we need to learn how that works. So find a course, find something that is as tailored as possible to what it is that you are trying to do. If you're a managing partner at a law firm, you need to be thinking about this right now. How do you get education in the hands of your people? If you are general
Hmm.
counsel leading a legal department, right, and an owner, an operator, a REIT, or developer, if you are not thinking about how you get this knowledge in the hands of your people, you're already behind. So you got to start with knowledge, you got to start with education. We need to be able to slow down a little bit and recognize that we are in this phase of a great relearning, so to speak. And then it's not just us, it's everybody. And things are moving very, very quickly. And so we do need to kind of take that agency ourselves and educate ourselves. Find a class, find a course and there's a lot of great ones out there that are very specifically designed to be able to get people going from 0 to 1, so to speak. So I can't stress the importance of education enough.
That's great. And I think it's so critical to seek some of that stuff out that's really in your lane, that's speaking to what you do. Because for me to learn about what is useful to my corporate colleagues in terms of their deals and running diligence through AI really doesn't do me a ton of good. But I have very specific needs. So the idea about finding education and really kind of playing with it in your lane really resonates with me. So Nadine, a huge
Thank you.
pleasure to have you on. Really, really glad we made the time.
You too.
And I can't thank you enough for sharing really what you know and all your background with me, with this podcast, and with the people that ultimately get the pleasure to hear it.
Thank you. And thank you for your endless curiosity and for facilitating these conversations. Really, it's so important. And I just want to end on one final point,
Please.
in that, you know, everybody is always quick to think we have to find the right tool and implement the tool. A lot of folks are out there doing these pilots on all of these big platforms that you and I are talking about. That's actually the wrong step. The tools, the apps, they're just a means. They're not the end. And so it really, really needs to start with the education component, because once people are able to start thinking differently, once you then get to that vendor identification, evaluation, and pilot phase,
Mm.
people are already starting to think differently. They're coming to the table more empowered. They're coming to the table more educated. Right? They're not feeling that overwhelm of where do I get started. And so I would leave on that point is don't rush to try to get your firm or your department up and running with a tool. I would rush to get your people empowered with the knowledge and skill set that they need.
Wonderful. All right,
Thank
Nadine,
you, friend.
thanks
Thank you so
again.
much.
Can't thank you enough.
Thanks, man.
All right. And thanks everyone for joining this episode of Signals, Not Noise. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.